Those of us who work in Islamic studies in the United States find ourselves dealing with many different subjects, partly because of political demands and so forth. Everyone says, oh, you know something about Islam? You must know about terrorism then. And so we have to answer all these questions. And so I have dealt with many of these issues in publications because I think that's a responsible way to do it. And in my developing research over the years, I have found that one of the most productive ways to enter into a new subject is to find things which do not fit with standard expectations, which whenever you find a situation like this, when there's a phenomenon, a case, a text, a teaching that is completely unexpected, and you say, how is that possible? It means that your general expectations, the standard theories, are not adequate. And so then you have the opportunity to revise that. So very briefly, I had noticed very early in my career that there were some old Orientalist views that a certain kind of what someone has called Indomania, the sort of obsessive view that India is the source of all teachings and so forth. And there is a particular debate about Sufism which arose within early Orientalism, where the British founders of this field of study found Sufism very attractive, but they didn't like Islam in general, so they decided that Sufism must be coming from somewhere else, whether it's Greek philosophy or from yoga or whatever. And so I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. But then I ran across a reference to a text which was an Arabic work on Hatha Yoga. So I thought, let's look at the history, what actually has been done in terms of engagement with yoga among Sufis. And so this opened up a very complicated terrain which had not been previously understood very well. Multiple translations. This Arabic text, which was called the Amrita Kunda, the original that it purports to translate, was widely distributed and read in many of the manuscripts are found in Istanbul and in Cairo. And I started to study this over 20 years ago, and it kept on going, and more things complicated. There were 2 Turkish translations. There were at least 4 Persian translations of the text, and even one in Dakhani Urdu. And so this showed a very intense engagement with the subject. And so the story is complicated, and I won't go into it now, but a couple of very simple conclusions can be stated. First of all, there was a knowledge of yoga in certain circles, some of which were connected to Sufism, and some of them were quite knowledgeable. Number 2, this is primarily focused on people in India, in other words, who actually could encounter these texts and sometimes engage with individual practitioners, because the yogis were people who had gone through a ritual death and did not have to observe the dietary purity rules of Brahmanical Hinduism. So they could show up in a langar, in an open kitchen at a Sufi shrine, and chat about things like breath control and so forth. But it would be a complete misunderstanding to say that Sufism is entirely based upon this. We have to acknowledge that in every society that we know of, there are multiple religions and cultures, and so there's lots of things that go on in discussion where people mingle, and so it's not surprising to see that there is an attempt made to chart a relationship. Sometimes these are very creative, so these texts oftentimes treat the Hindu mantras as zikr in the Indian language. So the word like Om is translated as the Arabic phrase Ya Rab. It's a highly creative translation. But it means that it functions in an equivalent fashion. So these are, and then we were also told that the great Indian yogi Gorakhnath is also known as Khizr. So these kinds of equivalences are ways of making connections. So I'm still working on a number of difficult texts in this area, so stay tuned for future developments. I hope I'll be able to deliver some more. But I have about 25 essays in that volume, many of which are focused on some of the texts that emerge in this tradition. And so it's a fascinating subject. So, but let's shift to al-Hallaj.
أنت الذي حست كل أين بنحو لاح فأين أنت وفي فنائي وفي فنائي وجدت أنت